I'm going to present our research entitled Financial Analysis of the Cooperatives in the Mountain Province, a basis for local government intervention, with my co-author, Dr. Regina K. Puma-at. So now, if we're going to look at now in Mountain Province, cooperative is actually a very popular on as a strategy in how to uplift the living standards of the people here. So in Mountain Province, there are actually 45 active cooperatives who are engaged in business activities. The Philippines and other institutions provide support for these activities. However, despite of the supports that these cooperatives get from the government, there are still actually some problems that they encountered or some challenges. Therefore, now it is the intention of this research to determine the financial performance of cooperatives in Mountain Province as a basis for providing recommendations for local government intervention to, to improve profitability, liquidity, and stability. Okay. So in our research, we actually have 11 there are actually 11 small groups cooperatives and 7 medium cooperatives who has a total asset of 15 million to 50 million, and a large cooperative of 6 large cooperatives which has 50 million to 100 million total assets. So this is actually now our uh, respondents for this data. So in here we use actually documentary analysis. So in the documentary analysis, we actually ask the respondents to please provide us some financial statements, focusing probably on net income, sales revenue, members' equity, the members' contribution, current assets, current liability, and the total assets. We're able to calculate these things and to get now the profitability ratio, the liquidity ratio, and then the stability ratio. So in our presentation, we actually have here the profit margin. So the table shows now that 84.4% of the cooperatives are above the profit margin ratio. So however, there are actually 2 cooperatives that indicated no net income. This may indicate that the majority of the cooperatives in Mountain Province during 2019 are operating above 50% probability of their peso sales, as evidence of the computed with the standard mean of 0.5034. For the table 2, it actually also shows that 48.9% of the cooperatives did not meet the assumed standard rate of earning on owner's equity, which is 20% and above. This could be the result of various social responsibilities provided by cooperatives to their members, as well as economic responsibilities. For liquidity ratios, we could look at there now that majority of the cooperatives, or 80%, met the required current ratio of 2 to 1 as assumed. There are actually more than 2 pesos of current assets to pay for every 1 peso of current liabilities. There are also 15.6% of the cooperatives that have below the required 2.0 current ratio. These cooperatives that have below 2 pesos of the current assets to pay for every peso of their current liabilities. Next table is table 4. It's actually now focused on the working capital. For the working capital, there are actually 34 cooperatives that have about 50% working capital in every peso of total assets. There are only 11 firms that have required below 50% of the working capital based on the total assets. This means that cooperatives have relative liquidity of total assets. On the average, the distribution resources employed by the cooperatives can be said favorable, with the computed standard mean of 0.2812. For the equity ratio, It can be gleaned that from the above table, there are actually 82.2% firms that have above 50% equity ratio. This reflects the financial strengths and caution on part of the cooperative members. The equity ratio is favorable as more than 50% of the assets are owned by the members. This indicates the margin of safety for the members. Our last table now is the debt ratio. So this presents the relative amounts of resources provided by the cooperative members and creditors. It shows that below 50% of the total equity are provided by the creditors for the 75.6% cooperatives, and above 50% of the total equity are provided by the creditors for 20% firms. The finding now support that Table 5 that more than 50% of the equity is owned by the members, which is a good inclination of the financial health of the cooperatives. However, if you're going to look at the table, the cooperatives include can still improve their extent of trading in equity, especially now that there are 4.4% missing as a result of no liabilities declared by the respondents' cooperatives. So now in my conclusion, majority of the cooperatives in Mountain Province are operating above 50% profitability. And also, majority of the cooperatives are liquid or have the ability to pay their current obligations as they fall due from their current assets. And majority of the cooperatives are stable. More than 50% of the assets are owned by their members. So in our recommendation, we actually urge now that the government of Mountain Province would look into programs or more favorable local laws that would now uplift or boost the performance of these cooperatives. For example, one of here is to review and reduce local government fees, especially now in Sagada and then in Bontoc. The fees are actually quite higher compared to other municipalities. Another one is reduce red tape. Of course, in the renewal of business. If you're going now to the municipal government, the staff there would give you one on a part only of the requirements that needed for the renewal of the permit, and then you would have to go there again for then another requirement. They don't actually give you the whole list, so this now produces red tape on part of the cooperatives. This is one of the reasons why most of the cooperatives are not registered. The second one is to provide trainings and developmental programs for these cooperatives to be competitive locally and internationally, especially now that we have products, for example, like the Sagada weaving, that can be brought out and to compete in the international market. The second one now is to continue implementing infrastructure projects, particularly roads, wherein you're going now to transport some products to far-flung areas, and also buildings are really needed. So thank you for listening. This is now my presentation.